All right, Nick, let's talk about the Detroit Lions. The Lions went into this offseason already a fantastic team, a lot of great players on this roster, but everyone was saying, let's go ahead, let's make some splashes in free agency. Let's do some really big things. The Lions, they didn't really do that. And I think there's a specific reason as to why that came to fruition. And it may surprise people. I think Brad Holmes had a really interesting thought here on this one. We'll dive into that in just a second. But first, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, Lions fans probably wanted them to go out and make some big splashes, get some big time players come in on this team just to make some upgrades. But when Brad Holmes sat down and compared their guys to the other guys, the numbers just did not add up for them to add somebody else into the roster. They already had the best guys with them. Let's get into the article and we'll talk more about it on the other side. This, of course, from SI.com. Says Brad Holmes was recently interviewed on Tim 20 Man, hosted by 20 Man in the Huddle podcast, during which he discussed the Lions' offseason moves. The key word for the team's movements were quite clear: patience and discipline. Holmes and the Lions hadn't prioritized bringing back the team's own free agent. This strategy was not fully intentional, though, as Holmes revealed on 20 Man. Says, like I was saying, we didn't come in with the idea of let's just bring back our guys. But when you started stacking our guys versus the rest of the league, it just kind of made sense, that your general manager expressed. And I thought this was really interesting. And, did it make sense? Who were the guys that were in the similar category as the players, as the Lions brought back? Were they the same as them? So we have a couple of charts here comparing the three most notable, the biggest contracts the Lions brought back in free agency. First up, we have Derek Barnes, linebacker for the Lions. They brought him back. And the next highest paid guy, I went higher rather than lower as far as closest contracts, was Robert Spillane in New England. And you see what's going on here. Derek Barnes' overall grade, pretty good here. You see a 71.8 roughly right there for Barnes, much higher than Spillane's 68.5 PFF overall grade in New England. So a good amount of money better, or a good amount of PFF grade better for Barnes here. They look at the salary, they actually brought him back on a cheaper deal as well. $8 million APY for Barnes versus Spillane's $11 million APY. So first, you see this. Barnes stacks up better than Spillane does. So it makes sense for them to bring him back. But the fact that they were able to bring him back for less money, $2 million less per year, than Robert Spillane was able to get in New England. Again, really smart move by Detroit. Well, let's go. How many times can they do this? Let's go to the next graph. We have Onwuzurike from the Lions. I always butcher pronouncing that one, but that one is interesting. And Robertson Harris, the defensive tackle that went to the New York Giants. Look here, 70 overall PFF grade for Onwuzurike. Then Robertson Harris got about a 51 overall PFF grade for him. Then you look at the salaries, though. Detroit, they're paying him $4 million a year compared to Robertson Harris at the New York Giants, $4.5 million a year. So a $500,000 a year discount for, I'd say, what is that? Roughly 15 points over in PFF grade. Again, better player for a better price than the next highest paid guy on this list. Then finally, the last one we have, Marcus Davenport for Detroit, John Fox for Atlanta. This one I think was another kind of a close matchup, but you see 53 overall PFF grade for Davenport, 51.5 overall PFF grade for Fox. Then the salary in millions, about $2.5 million a year for Davenport, $2.75 million for Fox. Close. These guys, they're right around each other, but still, little bit better performance by Davenport, a little bit lower pay they're able to get him for. So I think overall the strategy here was Holmes sat down at the table. He said, let's look at our guys, look at their guys. Well, all our guys are a little bit better than these guys that we're thinking about. It could be, apples to apples comparison to them. Let's see if we can bring them back for a little bit less money. And every single time they were able to accomplish that. And I think this was just a masterclass GM move by Brad Holmes. He might not have come in with the intention of doing this, but what he was able to accomplish through free agency, I think just shows why the Lions are going to still be one of the best teams, if not the best team in football next season. He's able to get his guys back that fit the culture that he wanted, that already familiar with the team. They're actually a little bit better than the next highest paid guy and bring them back for less money. I think overall this was a really smart move by the Lions. And, you just can't get too much better than that. But, Nick, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one. But before we get to you, Lions fans, in the comment section below, is there anyone else the Lions retained? These are the biggest contracts that they signed. Is there anyone else the Lions re-signed this season that you think is also a really solid player that adds a lot to this team you're glad they brought back? Let us know your favorite player the Lions had retained this offseason in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest move by Detroit?
So I think it's a really good strategy and a really smart one. So if you look at the top 5 teams currently with the most cap space in the National Football League, just to read them off to you, according to overthecap.com, you got the Patriots at 1, Raiders at 2, Lions at 3, Arizona Cardinals at 4, Tennessee Titans at 5. There's a commonality on 4 of those 5 teams. They're frankly not very good. A lot of losing going on in 4 of the 5. The one anomaly is the Detroit Lions, and that's a little strange, a little bit of an aberration. Usually really good teams don't have a lot of cap space to play with, or if they have some cap space, they want to go all in on a title run. They throw a lot of dollars just to try and get incrementally better. That's normally how it works, but that's not a real effective use of dollars and strategy. And you have to look at the smartest money managers and investors in the world to understand that. So, for example, Warren Buffett runs Berkshire Hathaway, as 99.9% of people obviously know, most famous investor of all time. He is famous for sitting on cash, literally hundreds of billions of dollars of cash, because he doesn't find businesses he wants to buy or invest in. He's not going to go out and use his dollars, his company's dollars, and put it in businesses and investments that he doesn't think will help his business do better, generate more returns, generate more dollars, right? He will sit in cash for years and in some cases decades until the opportunities present itself, right? That's just how he operates, and that's a smart strategy, right? It's obviously worked out very well for Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. They're one of the best performing companies ever, certainly as an investment, and one of the largest and most diversified. It's a famous American story. So understanding that sometimes you don't have to put dollars to work if you have it. In fact, a lot of hedge funds operate this way. There'll be hedge funds that'll generate, 15, 20% returns annually, and they'll have a lot of people then line up, institutional investors, the wealthy, to say, hey, I want to give you $1 million to make 20% per year for me, and they'll turn it down. Why? Because they recognize at that moment in time, there aren't investments available that they can purchase, that they can acquire to generate those returns. So like, no, I don't want to take any more money right now because I don't have anything else to buy. I don't have anything that can make my portfolio better. And that's what smart people do. That's what the big smart money managers do, the Buffetts, and that's what big corporate leadership does. They'll go out and buy companies and invest when there are opportunities to. If not, they'll sit in cash, they'll buy back their stock, they'll raise dividends or whatever, right? That's what the Lions are doing here. They have the money, they have the capital. They could go out and spend it on players, right? And I know the Aiden Hutchinson's deal is coming up in terms of getting an extension, but the Lions cap space right now currently is 42 million bucks, right? The Hutchinson's deal year one is not going to be $42 million. So obviously they can block up and front load Aiden Hutchinson's extension and still have a lot of cap space to play with. But they're not using that cap space because the deals aren't there. We talked about it all the time about how the defensive end, interior defensive line market this offseason specifically has been tanking, right? There is no need to try and catch the allegorical falling knife there in terms of a market that's rapidly depreciating. So at this point, just sit on your dollars, right? You made some good moves. I love the DJ Reed edition earlier. We talked about it, a few months ago when they made that deal. Outside of that, look, if there's no one better than the players you currently have access to, stick with the players because like you said, it'll help with the culture. You won't lose that mentality, especially with 2 coordinators leaving. That's an important factor to consider as well. I think the Lions and Brad Holmes here, they're not getting the attention the way other teams are doing just because, you look at the Bears, who are making a lot of great moves, by the way. Nothing against the Bears, but it's a lot of headline grabbers, and that gets a lot of media attention. But Brad Holmes in Detroit is doing a really good job not taking the cheese, not falling victim to, I got the cap space, I got to spend it. If the deals aren't there, if the investment doesn't make sense, sit on your cash. That's what Warren Buffett does, and that's what Brad Holmes is doing.
Yeah, Nick, and I think, like you said, this is just going to be a great move for them going forward, especially when you look at what they're doing. Some teams, like you said, they're good and they hit free agency and they have a ton of dollars. They're going to go all in. What I'm seeing the Lions, what I think of when I hear what these moves are doing, and he actually kind of, to your point, I don't know if you read this part or not, but Holmes actually compares what they're doing to financial investing a little bit. So I thought it was very interesting comparison. But he comes into it, and I don't think this is an all-in move for the right now. I think this is an all-in move for the future. He's saying let's save our money. Let's bring back guys at a discount because we know they're better players than what we could get for that same rate. It's like getting a used like Honda Civic. It's a great car. It's reliable. It's good. Dependable. It's gonna get you to point A to point B, and if you can get it for a little bit of a value, it's gonna be really good. But you gotta save your money for your Ferraris, your Lamborghinis, your Aiden Hutchinsons. He's gonna have a deal. Your Brian Branch, eventually he's gonna need a deal. Kirby Joseph is gonna cost money in the future. There's a lot of guys around this team and there's a lot of guys that are still really young, pretty far off. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to cost money in the future. Laporta's going to cost money. There's a lot of guys that haven't got paid yet. So if you save your money now, you're going to be setting yourself up better for that long-term play. So I think this is good. Some less smart teams than Lions would go out and spend tons of dollars, bring in short-term gain, instant gratification type of deal here. Get a really good player on a 2-year deal for a lot of money, shoot yourself in the foot a little bit there. But no, the Lions, they're bringing back their guys for a discounted price, setting themselves up for the contracts of the players that they want to keep in-house, that they already know that, again, like we said, fit their culture, fit what they're trying to do with this team. They're going to reward those guys, pay those guys going forward. So I think overall, this strategy for the Lions, very good one. It makes a lot of sense, but not many people are able to pull this off. And not many people have the discipline to say, we've got a ton of money. We can go into free agency and do a lot of big splashy things if we want to. But Brad Holmes sits down, analyzes numbers, and saying, hey, it's a better move for us to stick with the guys that we know for a discounted price. I think that was a really great move by this team going forward.
And there's a lot of cautionary tales, right, with teams taking the opposite approach. And for a lot of time, and us included, I think we said, well, listen, if you've got the cap space and you think you're going to win, especially if you got a young quarterback on a cheap deal, go all in. And at face level, that strategy does make a lot of sense, but the risk of when it doesn't work is extremely high. So I'll bring up 3 teams as an example. Let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had Trevor Lawrence. Things were looking good. So they went out and spent big in free agency and overpaid for solid veterans, not stars, but they overpaid for good quality players. The problem is a few years later, right, they got one playoff win out of it, a miraculous comeback against the Chargers, and now they're in total reset, right? We have no idea what Jacksonville's going to look like. Got a new coach going forward. A lot of the veterans they signed then are gone, and now their cap situation went from they're fantastic to not that great. Their roster is not as flexible. Tough situation there. Let's look at the Houston Texans. They hit the mother load, CJ Stroud, right? Back-to-back seasons, going to the postseason with one playoff win each year. The problem is after his rookie season, they spent a lot of money on veterans, brought in a lot of guys, and they didn't change their standing at all. They won one playoff game his rookie year, and at the end of his second year, they ended up with just one playoff win, right? Again, not spending all that money for no return, right? That's sort of the Warren Buffett issue I mentioned a few minutes ago. If you're going to spend the money, you're expecting some kind of return. The Texans spent the money, they didn't get the return, and this offseason, it's been a lot of resetting, unrolling a lot of those moves to try and recalibrate themselves for the future. And the final example is the Miami Dolphins, right? They went hyper all in with Tua. They went out and made all kinds of big deals on offense and defense. And it worked to a point, right? They went from a team that was tanking a couple years ago to a team that was going to the postseason and dropping, 70 points in a regular season game. But the problem is they're a little older. Few injuries took their toll, some bad luck, and now they're in a total reset trying to figure things out, right? You can be hyper aggressive. You can be really, really just throwing money and just trying to bring in a lot of players. And sometimes it works. The Rams won a Super Bowl that way. But the majority of the time, it doesn't. And if the deals aren't there, if the value isn't there, if you can't project a significant rate of return, which in the NFL is winning more football games, then don't go out and make those moves. It's more important to hold on to your cash. Maybe some people in the media won't like it. Maybe the fan base will get frustrated. But Brad Holmes has taken the right approach here, the multi-year approach. The goal for the Detroit Lions is really twofold. Is one, to win a title during their title window of this current run, which I think is still open for this year and probably next. But number two, extend their contention window beyond just this 3 or 4 year championship window to the next 5, 10, 15 years, right? The Philadelphia Eagles have won 2 Super Bowls over the past decade with 2 completely different teams because how their general manager manages their team and keeps contention windows open and creating multiple championship windows in the context of an entire contention window. That's exactly what Brad Holmes is doing here. It's a great strategy, an example of why Detroit isn't going anywhere for a very, very long time.